My daughter put her hand across my face inside my own kitchen, and I didn't make a single sound. But the next morning, when she came downstairs expecting everything to be back to normal, expecting me to have already forgiven her, the way I always did, she stopped cold in the doorway when she saw who was already sitting at my table. I still see that moment clearly. She walked in wearing her robe, her hair loose, running one hand along the wall the way she did when she was hungover. She smelled the coffee, heard the quiet. She looked at the table. My good tablecloth, the white one with the embroidered blue edges, and for a second she just stared. Then she saw the folders, and then she saw the faces. The color left her. That's the only way I can describe it. Everything that made her look bold and certain just drained away in one moment. Her mouth opened and closed once, like she was trying to find the word for what she was seeing. She couldn't find it. Because there isn't a word for the moment, a person realizes they've been outmaneuvered by the woman they spent 8 months trying to break. But to understand how we got to that morning, I have to go back further. I have to introduce myself properly. My name is Mavis Trent. I'm 67 years old. I've lived in this white craftsman bungalow on West Haven Street in Knoxville, Tennessee for 31 years. My late husband Cecil bought it when my daughter was 7 and my son's entente was 5, back when this neighborhood still had all its elm trees. Most of those elms are gone now. Cecil is gone too. A stroke 4 years ago this past February, while he was sitting in his rocking chair reading the newspaper. That's not how I'd have chosen for him to go, but it was peaceful. Cecil deserved peaceful. After he passed, I learned to be alone. It wasn't something I was prepared for. 35 years of marriage leaves a particular kind of silence when it ends. Not the comfortable kind, but the hollow kind, where you keep setting 2 cups out of habit and then have to put 1 back. I worked through it. I kept up his herb garden. I kept up the house. I got active again in my church choir at First Methodist on Cedar Bluff Road. My neighbor and oldest friend Millicent Oakes came over every Thursday for tea, and we'd sit on the porch and solve all the world's problems together. Millicent had been a legal aid attorney for 30 years before she retired. Sharpest mind I've ever known in a human being. I had a life, a quiet life, but mine. Then my daughter called from Atlanta. She'd been married to a man named Cord for 9 years. I never fully trusted Cord. There was something slippery about his eyes, but I kept that to myself because she loved him, and my children's happiness matters more than my opinions. The marriage ended badly. I didn't know how badly until she was standing on my porch in March with 3 suitcases and her 2 kids, my granddaughter Amara, 14, and my grandson little Troy, 9. "Just until I get back on my feet, Mama," she said. I opened the door. Of course I did. The first month was almost sweet. Having children in this house again filled up some of the quiet. Amara helped me in the garden. Troy reminded me of Anton at that age, curious about everything, always asking questions. I cooked the meals I used to cook when my daughter was young, the ones I knew she loved. Smothered chicken, sweet potato pie. We'd sit at the table at night, all 4 of us, and it almost felt like something whole. I should have paid more attention to the way it changed. It happened the way these things do. So gradually you don't notice the direction you're moving until you're already somewhere you never intended to be. It started with the debit card. She asked to borrow it one afternoon to get groceries. Fine. Then she used it again without asking, for $160 at a store I didn't recognize. When I asked about it, she looked at me with such exhausted impatience, like I was the unreasonable one, and said, "Mama, it was just toiletries. You want me and the kids to go without toiletries?" I let it go. Then it was gas for her car, then a pair of shoes, then a restaurant charge for $63 on a Tuesday night when I thought she was home with the kids. By the 3rd month, I'd started hiding my purse. Cord started coming around by May. Apparently the divorce wasn't as final as she'd let me believe. He'd show up on a Friday night, and I'd hear them downstairs after midnight, voices low and intense. One Saturday morning, I came down to make coffee, and Cord was asleep on my couch, his boots on the cushions my mother had needle-pointed. I asked my daughter privately to ask him not to do that. The look she gave me was the first time I felt afraid of her. "He doesn't have anywhere to go right now," she said. "This is my house," I said. "And we're your family," she said, "or are strangers more important?" Millicent had started noticing. She'd stop at the gate on her Thursday visits and look at me with that measuring expression she probably used in courtrooms for decades. "You all right in there, Mavis?" I always said yes. The shame of it, that's the thing nobody talks about. The shame of being afraid of someone you gave birth to, someone you taught to walk and read and pray. How do you explain that to anyone? I stopped having Millicent over for tea. I told her my rheumatism was acting up. She knew I was lying. Millicent always knew. The money got worse. My daughter wasn't working. She was looking, she said, had some interviews in the works. Weeks passed. Months. She started using my credit card for things she didn't mention to me. I'd open the statement and find charges from bars I'd never heard of. A concert. A hotel once that I don't know the story behind and don't want to. When I brought it up, she didn't apologize. She got loud. "You don't know what I've been through," she'd say, and her voice had an edge that reminded me of someone drunk even when she wasn't. I gave up everything for that marriage. I moved to Atlanta for him. I put my whole career on hold, and then he left me with nothing, and I had nowhere to go. Do you know what that feels like? Do you even care? Of course I care, I'd say. Then stop acting like I'm a burden. I never said she was a burden. She put those words in my mouth and then punished me for them. The first time she got in my face was over a jar of honey. My neighbor, Mrs. Prater, gives me honey from her bees every fall, the good raw clover kind. I keep it on the third shelf of the pantry. One morning I went to get it and it was gone. I asked my daughter. She said she'd used it, so what? It was just honey. I said that honey was from Mrs. Prater and I'd been saving it. She stood up from the table. She was taller than me by 4 inches, took after her father that way, and she got very close to my face and said very quietly, "Are you seriously going to make me feel bad about a jar of honey?" I stepped back. My heart was doing something unhealthy. I looked at my daughter's eyes and I saw something in them I had no name for yet. A refusal. A refusal to be accountable to me in my own house. That night I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time and thought about the dripping sound of my whole life. There were good days mixed in. That's what keeps you confused. Some Sunday morning she'd come downstairs gentle and sweet and sit across from me with her coffee and talk about the kids, laugh at something I said, touch my hand. In those moments I'd think, there she is, that's my girl, that's who she really is underneath all this. And I'd convince myself the other version wasn't permanent. Then August came, and the subject of the house. Cecil had a modest life insurance policy when he died. Not a fortune, but enough that I don't have to worry month to month. My daughter found out about it. I don't know how. She started asking about it, at first in a roundabout way, then directly. "You should invest some of that, Mama. My friend knows a financial guy." I said no. A week later, "Mama, with that money in this house, you could really set yourself up." I said I was already set up. A week after that, she sat down across from me with her coffee like we were just two women talking. "The equity in this house alone, if you thought about putting it in both our names, we'd all have so much more security." I started to understand what she was after. "This is Cecil's house," I told her, the last time she brought it up. "It's going to stay Cecil's house." She didn't say anything. She just looked at me. Something shifted in the air between us that day, and it didn't shift back. The night it happened was a Thursday in November. I know the exact time because I'd just finished the 10 o'clock news and was rinsing my cup in the sink when I heard the front door. It was my daughter, later than she'd said, her shoes catching on the mat. She came into the kitchen and the smell came with her. Bourbon, the cheap kind, and something artificial underneath it, a sweetness that meant she'd been somewhere she didn't want to account for. I turned off the faucet. I stayed quiet. "What are you still doing up?" she said. "Not hello, not I'm home, not any of the small kindnesses that cost nothing." "Getting a glass of water," I said. She opened the refrigerator, stood there in the cold light staring at the shelves like she was angry at what she found. Then she closed it, not slammed, just closed, controlled, and turned around and looked at me. "I need you to think seriously about what we talked about," she said. "About the house, about my name being on it." "Shayna, it is 10 o'clock at night." "I'm serious, Mama. I need to know you're going to take care of your family." "I do take care of this family," I said. "I take care of every person under this roof." "You take care of this house." Her voice had that edge. "You're more concerned with protecting some wood and some paint than with your own daughter's future. Same as you always were. Always about the things, never about the people." I kept my voice steady. "Let's talk about this in the morning when you're feeling better." What happened next happened fast, the way bad things always do. She crossed the kitchen in 3 steps. She grabbed my arm, above the elbow, her fingers hard as clamps, and when I flinched back, my hip caught the corner of the counter. She was talking, words coming fast and ugly, about how selfish I was, how I'd never really been there for her, how Cecil always valued Anton more, and she knew it, and had always known it, things she'd been storing somewhere for years, and was finally spending all at once. I tried to pull my arm free. "Let go of me, you're hurting me." She let go, and then her open hand came across my face. The sound of it seemed too loud for the room. I pressed my palm to my cheek. I looked at her. I had no words, not one. She stood there, breathing fast, looking almost surprised at herself. But not sorry. I watched her face for sorry, and I did not find it. She went upstairs without another word. I stood in my kitchen with my hand still against my cheek, listening to the house breathe around me, the refrigerator hum. The faucet drip I'd been meaning to fix for 2 months. The distant sound of my daughter's bedroom door pulling shut. Then I walked to the half-bath by the back hall and looked at myself in the mirror under that yellow light. My cheek was already red. In an hour, it would be something darker. The skin below my eye was beginning to swell. I looked older than 67 in that moment. I looked like someone who had been slowly disappearing and had finally noticed. I stood there and I made myself look directly into my own eyes, and something inside me went absolutely still, not numb, still, the way a compass needle settles when it finds its direction. I went back to the kitchen. I got out my mother's old heavy-bottom pot and set it on the stove. I went to the pantry and took down the jar of apple slices I'd been putting up since September, Honeycrisps from the farm stand on Asheville Highway. I started making apple butter. It was nearly 11 o'clock at night, and I was making apple butter because it was the only thing I could do with my hands that felt like something solid and real and mine. With every stir of that wooden spoon, something in me got clearer. I thought about my options with a precision I hadn't felt in months. I could absorb it, pack it down with everything else, and pretend morning would make it better. I had done that before. I knew exactly where that road went. Or I could be done. I reached for the cordless phone. My hands were steady. I called Millicent first. She picked up on the second ring. Millicent sleeps lightly on purpose. Always has. Always said you never know when someone is going to need you in the night. I told her everything, not just tonight. 8 months of everything. The money, the credit cards, Cord sleeping on my mother's needle-pointed cushions. The way my daughter had looked at me when I said Cecil's house would stay Cecil's house. Millicent was quiet for a moment when I finished. "What do you need from me?" she said. Not "I told you so." Not "poor Mavis." Just, "What do you need?" "I need you here in the morning," I said. "I need you to bring the paperwork that makes this official." She understood without another word needing to be said between us. "I'll be there at 8:30, she said. "And Mavis, you are doing the right thing." My second call was to Geneva, the family advocate at the Community Assistance Center on Magnolia Avenue. I'd met Geneva 6 months ago through my church when she came to give a presentation on elder resources. She'd given me her card and said to call any time, no judgment. I'd put that card in the kitchen drawer and tried not to think about why I kept it close. I thought about it clearly now. She answered on the third ring. I told her who I was and what had happened. She asked 2 questions. Was I safe tonight, and was I willing to make a formal report? I said yes to both. "I'll contact the officer on the elder abuse unit first thing," she said. "We'll be there at 8:30. My third call was the hardest one. I went and stood at the bottom of the stairs and listened. My daughter's light was off. Then I went down the back hall to the room where Amara slept. I opened the door quietly. My granddaughter was awake. She was sitting up in the dark, her phone face down in her lap, and when she saw me in the doorway, she said, "Grandma," in a voice so small it cracked something open in me. "You heard," I said. She nodded. I sat on the edge of her bed and held her for a moment. She was 14 years old, and she had been hearing things in this house that a 14-year-old should never have to hear. I had been so focused on protecting what I thought was the peace that I hadn't thought carefully enough about what that peace was costing her. "I need you to be brave for me in the morning," I said. "Can you do that?" She took my hand. "Yes, ma'am." I didn't sleep. I sat in Cecil's rocking chair until around 5 in the morning, and then I got up and went back to work. I finished the apple butter and put it up in 3 jars with brass lids. I baked cornbread in the iron skillet, the kind Cecil always loved, with a thin drizzle of honey on top. I made a full pot of coffee. I spread my mother's tablecloth on the dining room table, the white one with the tiny blue forget-me-nots embroidered at each corner. I got out the blue willow china I saved for Thanksgiving. I cut a few sprigs of rosemary from the pot by the back door and put them in a small glass in the center of the table. Then I went upstairs and ran a bath with lavender salts and put on my church dress, the deep burgundy one with the pearl buttons. I did my hair in the way I wore it for 22 years standing in front of 4th grade classrooms. Pinned, neat, correct. I looked in the mirror at the bruise that was fully bloomed now under my eye, at the cut on my lip that had sealed overnight. I did not reach for my concealer. I made that decision standing right there and felt it lock into place inside me like a bolt going home. No more covering, not one more morning. At 8:25, Amara came downstairs already dressed. She appeared in the dining room doorway and I nodded at her and she came and sat at the table. We didn't say much, we didn't need to. At 8:30, the doorbell rang. Millicent was on the porch in her gray blazer, the professional one she wore to court for 30 years. Behind her stood Geneva from the community center, holding a portfolio of folders, and beside Geneva was Officer Lavinia Webb, a compact, serious woman in uniform I recognized from the neighborhood watch meetings at the rec center. Millicent looked at my face, at the bruise, at the swelling below my eye. I saw her jaw tighten, but she said nothing about it and everything about it at the same time, the way only someone who has known you for 40 years can do. "Good morning, Mavis," she said. "Good morning, come in, coffee's ready." I led them to the dining room. Amara stood when they entered, the way I'd raised her mother to do and was raising her now. Millicent touched her shoulder gently. They sat, Millicent to my right, Geneva across from her, Officer Webb positioned near the doorway. The folders went in the center of the table, beside the rosemary sprigs. We had been there perhaps 7 minutes when I heard the stairs. My daughter came down slow, the way she always did in the mornings, one hand trailing the wall. She was still in her robe. She smelled the coffee. She turned toward the dining room doorway and stopped. She took in the tablecloth first, the good china, the cornbread, the apple butter in its jar with its brass lid. Then she saw Amara's face, careful, watchful, old past her years in that moment. Then she saw the people, and then she saw the uniform. That was when her face went from confused to understanding, and from understanding to something desperate, and backed into a corner. "What is this?" she said. No one answered right away. Millicent reached out very calmly and poured herself a cup of coffee. She added a little cream. She stirred it once. She placed the spoon on the saucer with a small, deliberate sound. "Shayna," she said, using my daughter's name like a hand placed on a shoulder. "I've known your mother since before you were born. I watched you grow up in this house. I remember when you were 9 years old and you used to come to my back fence every evening to see if my roses had dew blooms. You'd stand there so carefully and look at them, not picking, just looking, like you understood something about things being beautiful and fragile at the same time." My daughter's hands tightened on the doorframe. "You were a good child," Millicent said. Her voice was without anger, which somehow made it more powerful. "I don't know when you decided to turn your mother's love into a resource to be managed, but I suspect it happened gradually enough that you stopped seeing it clearly. That's what I'm here for this morning, to give you some clarity. You called the police on your own daughter," she said to me. Her voice was climbing. "You actually called the police on me." "Sit down," I said. It came out quiet, but she sat. Geneva placed a form on the table, turned it so my daughter could read the heading. "This is a formal Elder Protective Services report documenting physical assault and financial exploitation. The incident last night and a document pattern going back 8 months." She set a second document beside it. "This is the notice of eviction proceedings, which your mother's attorney will be filing today with the county court." Eviction. My daughter said the word like she was tasting something she'd never encountered. "This is Cecil's house," I said. "It was never going to be anything else. I think part of you knew that, and I think that's why last night happened." "Mama, you can't." She looked at Amara then, and her voice changed, went softer, went for the place she knew might be soft. "Baby, tell her. Tell her she can't do this to our family." Amara looked at her mother for a long, full moment, a moment that had its own quiet courage in it. "Grandma," she said, "I already told Officer Webb what I heard last night." My daughter went very still. Officer Webb leaned slightly forward. "Miss Trent," she addressed my daughter with a formality that had its own particular weight, "a minor witness has provided an account of the incident. Combined with your mother's formal report and her visible injuries, I'm here to take your statement and advise you regarding a charge of assault of an elderly person." "I am not elderly," I said. Officer Webb's expression almost shifted. "It's a legal designation, ma'am. No offense meant." "None taken." I served myself a piece of cornbread. What followed was hard. I won't pretend it wasn't. My daughter cried real tears. The kind that don't perform for anyone, the kind that come from somewhere you didn't know, was still that tender. She tried to explain, and some of what she said was even true. She had been lost. She had been terrified. The divorce had broken something fundamental in her, and she had looked for somewhere solid to fall. And she had fallen on me because I was the one person who had never in her whole life let her hit the ground. I understood all of that. I had understood it for months. Understanding it had been the problem. "Understanding why you did it doesn't mean I can accept that you did it," I said. "You put your hand across my face in my own kitchen, and then you walked upstairs and went to sleep." She didn't have an answer for that. There isn't one. Officer Webb was professional and quiet about the whole thing. There was no scene, no sirens, no spectacle for the neighbors. What happened was an agreement, documented in writing and witnessed by Millicent and Geneva. My daughter would voluntarily leave the premises. By 5 o'clock that evening, the children would remain with me while family services completed their assessment, and she would complete mandatory counseling as a condition of the deferred charge. Before she went upstairs to pack, she stopped in the doorway and looked at me. Her eyes were swollen, her hair was still loose. She looked, in that moment, very young and very tired and very far from who she'd intended to become. "Are you going to tell Anton?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She nodded once. She didn't ask me not to. That felt like the first honest thing that had passed between us in a very long time. After she went upstairs, Millicent reached over and took my hand. She held it without speaking for a while. Then she said simply, "You did good, Mavis." I held onto that. The weeks that followed had their own particular strange texture. The house was quieter, but differently quiet than it had been after Cecil died. Not hollow this time, just still. Amara stayed with me while the family services process worked itself out. We ate supper together every night at that same dining room table. She told me about school. I told her about the elm trees that used to line this street when her mother was small. She asked me to teach her to make apple butter, and I did. We stood side by side at the stove on a Saturday afternoon, and she stirred the pot carefully, and I watched her and thought about all the things that can be passed down between women when the women choose to pass them. Little Troy stayed with Anton and his wife while things settled. Anton called me every night for the first 3 weeks. He never once said he was angry at his sister. He is a steady man, always has been, and steady people know that anger spends itself on the wrong things. My daughter completed her counseling. She got a job in Atlanta, a real one, with her own footing under her. We talk on the phone once a week now. The calls are short and careful, not the way things used to be between us, but they are honest. For the first time in a long time, when she asks how I am, I believe that she actually wants to know. I am still in my house on West Haven Street. Cecil's rocking chair is still by the window. The herb garden came through the winter all right. Millicent comes on Thursdays again, and we drink our tea on the porch and solve whatever problems present themselves. My cheek healed. The bruise faded in 2 weeks. What has taken longer, what is still healing, if I am going to be truthful with you, is the particular sorrow of turning toward your own child and saying, this far and no further. There is no easy way to do that. There is no version of it that doesn't cost you something you were hoping to keep. But here is what I know now that I didn't know 8 months ago. Love is not the same thing as submission. All those months I told myself that staying quiet was protecting her, protecting the family, protecting something fragile. What I was actually protecting was her permission to keep going. My silence was not patience, it was fuel. I kept Cecil's porch railing that same sage green he always loved. I painted over a chip in it last spring and matched the color exactly, standing on that step with my small brush the way I always do. And I thought, this house is mine, this railing is mine, this quiet is mine. I earned it. And the apple butter from that night, by the way. The batch I made at 11 o'clock while I was still shaking and deciding, it was the best I've ever put up. Rich and dark and exactly sweet enough. I gave 1 jar to Millicent and kept 1 for myself and gave the 3rd to Amara to take when she went home to her mother. I told her it was for both of them. Some things you give anyway, even when they cost you. That's not weakness. That's just knowing who you are.